Temporary Protected Status o TPS may pag-asa pa nga bang maipasa? The Department of Homeland Security assures the Filipino-American community that they are listening and they will take everything into consideration before finally making that final decision on this humanitarian aid. Don Tagala reports.
In a last-ditch effort to convince the Department of Homeland Security to grant the hundreds of thousands of Filipino nationals in the U.S. temporary protected status or TPS, Philippine Ambassador to the U.S. Jose Cuecia Jr. hosted a dialogue between Filipino-American community leaders and DHS officials at the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. Wednesday. TPS would allow a number of Filipino nationals to temporarily stay and work in the U.S. while the Philippines continues to recover from the devastation brought by Super Typhoon Yolanda last November.
Of the 16 million people that are estimated to be affected by the disaster, 3 million continue to have difficulties accessing shelter, medical attention.
DHS Assistant Secretary Alan Burson says TPS for the Philippines remains under consideration by Secretary Jay Johnson and Deputy Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
I'm sure that the government will give due consideration to this views as they make their decision on this request of the Philippine government for temporary protected status for Filipinos.
Burson says DHS is also looking for reliable, concrete evidence on the number of Filipinos displaced and are still currently affected by the devastation.
There's three bases on which to grant temporary protected status. The first is an armed conflict, which doesn't apply. The second is an environmental disaster, which applies. The third, which may or may not apply, is a temporary condition.
Burson says there are also legal aspects that still needs to be considered before passing TPS.
We need to hear the arguments in ways that are consistent with the way the law must be interpreted.
Even as Homeland Security goes into its final stretch of evaluating the Philippines' request for TPS, it remains uncertain when that final decision would be made.
So I can't give you a specific date. I know that my colleagues in the government understand the urgency of the situation and the necessity for due deliberation.
But community leader Loida Nicolas says their group remains hopeful that DHS would make a favorable decision soon.
We all felt that they gave us a good listening ear and that all of the points we brought up maybe have been brought before, but they are listening to it again, taking down notes.
Don Tagala, ABS-CBN News.